record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. This public hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. We'll be taking public testimony at the end of this hearing, so if you're here with us in the chamber, please sign up on the sheet near the chamber entrance over there. And if you're interested in testifying virtually, please email Ron Cobb for the link. That's ron.cobb@boston.gov, ron.cobb@boston.gov. And if you're already on for virtual testimony, I know we've got some folks. Just know that we know you're there in the waiting room, and we will take you in when we get to testimony. But please continue to watch the hearing streaming in the meantime. And then for all testimony, where we ask folks to just state your name and neighborhood or affiliation and try to keep your comments to a couple of minutes so we can get everybody in. Today's hearing is on docket 0467, order for a hearing to discuss pest control in the city of Boston. And I'm joined here by the sponsors of the hearing, which are Council President Ed Flynn, Councilor Liz Braden of District 9, and Councilor Aaron Murphy at large. So thrilled to be with them. And we will be starting out hearing from our Assistant Commissioner for Environmental Services at ISD, John Ulrich, who will kind of give a couple of opening remarks, and then we'll go to councilors, but we're also joined here by a number of folks from our Public Works team, and so we're likely to be calling them up as well. But for folks watching at home, you know, I think with this issue, which is such a critical issue on the city services side, it sort of splits between the folks who are directly responsible for pest control, rodent control, and that's what John will be speaking to coming out of ISD, and then we also have kind of just questions about our systems in the city and how we could reduce food waste that's accessible to rats in particular, and that's where we asked our Public Works folks to be on hand as well. So I think what I want to do is go first to the sponsors for just a few opening comments, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Ulrich. So Council President Flynn from District 2, if you wanted to start with opening remarks, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues, Councilor Braden, Councilor Murphy, Councilor Bach, and all of the city councilors for their work on rodent control, pest control related issues. Thank you to the Wu administration team for being here today, for their important work that they're doing. Also want to acknowledge the city employees that are out in the field that are doing this work, this important work every single day and night for us. This is an issue that I have brought attention to over and over again, but there have been increased reports of rodent and other activities in the past couple of years, and we have had neighbors reach out who are very concerned about this issue. During the budget, we have advocated for more rodent control resources. So you can see that this is an important issue, not just in my district, but citywide. And through the city council's effort and with working with Mayor Wu, we were able to significantly increase the budget. I want to discuss what ways the city can adequately handle these issues, including increasing enforcement, public awareness campaign and outreach, proper ways of disposing trash and preventing rodent activities. I know that some of my constituents have been talking about doing a pilot program on using hard top trash cans to prevent rodent from getting into the trash. Keeping our environment healthy is also critical. We are now seeing concerning cases in and around the South End and Mass Cass area, significant rodent control related issues there with some significant environmental challenges that we're going to be seeing very soon. At the same time, we should also talk about illegal dumping when we're discussing rodent control, as trash that is not properly disposed of can attract rodents and other public health issues. One of my constituents also brought in some photos of the way people bring out their trash in the mornings, not in barrels, just in trash bags. Those are critical issues We need to make sure that residents that don't speak English also know that we're also communicating with them in other languages other than English to make sure that they know the rules and regulations. But it's not just as simple as taking out your trash and walking back into your apartment. There's a science to it, and that's what we want to learn and we want to know. And this hearing will ensure that we're trying to provide residents with the most updated information. We've also met with code enforcement and pest control people from the city of Newton. I've talked to people from New York City, learning about their pest control challenges and activities. I do hope to get down to New York City soon to visit them and see what they're doing. But if we don't get this issue right, we can't get the major issues right. These quality of life issues are critical. These aren't sexy issues, but they're quality of life issues, the neighborhood concerns, and if you don't solve pest control issues, do you know what's going to happen? People will leave the city because they can't have mice and rats running around their neighborhood with little kids and with elderly. So we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that we're doing everything we can on this issue. I want to thank my colleagues for their important work. I want to thank the panelists for being here, but I also want to thank the residents, not just throughout District 2, but throughout the city who have contacted me about this critical quality of life issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much, President Flynn. Next up is Councillor Erin Murphy at large, and then Councillor Liz Braden. Councillor Murphy.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So to echo a lot of what Council President said, this is definitely a quality of life issue, but I do also feel like it's a public health issue. And it's also one of the #1 calls we get. I think between public safety and rodents, it's definitely up there on a daily basis. We're getting lots of emails, phone calls, videos, photos. And I know it's happening as an at-large city councilor. I know it's happening in every neighborhood. There are definitely pockets like in Chinatown, which President Flynn is always advocating for, and also in Alston, Brighton, that I know Councilor Braden is on top of. But I know in my own neighborhood, on my own street, at any moment you can see rats running through backyards or up the street. And so I definitely looking forward to this hearing and wanting to get the answers of like, what are we already doing as a city to address the pest control? So I look forward to hearing from ISD and Public Works if we have any questions to update us on all the great things you're already doing. But what more can we be doing as a city, and not just as city officials? President Flynn did mention we advocated for more funding to have more resources to the different departments that are helping us address this issue, but what also can we do better as residents to help be part of the solution? So thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Councillor Flynn and Councillor Murphy. We've had this hearing every year for the last 3 years. It's a perennial problem. As we read in the newspaper, we're not the only municipality to have rodent problems. Many of our neighbouring municipalities are facing similar challenges. But in Alston Brighton, I know this is a citywide problem, but in Alston Brighton we have a really intense situation at the moment. We have a lot of construction that seems to drive an increase, a spike in rodent activity. When there's demolition work been happening in an area, the activity of rats seems to increase dramatically. We have really distress calls from our neighbours and residents who are so concerned about the increase in rodent activity. They call 311, and we have great respect and appreciation for the 311 system, but our residents don't understand that when a call goes to 311, when it gets passed over to another department, the 311 case gets closed. So they think that's the end of it, and nobody's doing anything about the situation I have. So I think we need to educate our constituents more about what the process is. It goes to 311, and then what happens. We have a very distressing situation where we have code enforcement go out and give tickets to landlords for open trash cans, open dumpsters, trash that's not been disposed of, and yet nothing happens. And our residents are paying out, some of them are reporting they're paying thousands of dollars a year to rodent control to come and fix a problem on their property. But the rodent control people are saying, I can't do anything because that dumpster over there is the same as, you know, they're not dealing with the problem that's across their boundary line in another property. And so our homeowners are paying out a lot of money to try and mitigate the rodent impacts, and yet it's just like trying to empty the ocean with a tin porridge or a spoon. They're not getting anywhere, and there's an incredible level of frustration. So I really hope that we've managed to get some more funding for rodent control in this recent budget, and I'm really hoping that we can try and develop a coordinated, integrated approach to really tackle this problem and try and move the dial on the rodent and rat issues in our neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Braden. And we've also been joined by City Councillor at Large, Ruth C. Louis-Jen. Councillor Louis-Jen, you have the floor for an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bach, and thank you to everyone for being here to discuss this very important issue. I'm a citywide city councillor, and so you hear concerns from residents, whether it's in Councillor Braden's district or down where I live on the High Park Mattapan line, where folks are really concerned about how we mitigate these issues and are really going to drastic measures themselves and their neighbors to really control the issue because of, I guess, the depth of the problem and how and the scarcity of city resources in addressing it, whether it's with you know, actual bodies or with, you know, actual resources that have become scarce for us to use, like dry ice. But it is a quality of life issue that our residents care deeply about, and I know that our city cares deeply about, so I'm happy to be here to be talking about rats and pest control on my birthday, because this is the job that the voters have elected us to do. And these are the small issues that we got to get right in order for the voters to trust us with the larger systemic structural issues that we need to take care of. So happy to be here, and thank you for holding this hearing.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Louis-Jen, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
We're honored that you're here with us. Yeah, I'll just add my voice to everyone else's to say that, I mean, this is a problem that I see every day. I live on Beacon Hill, and definitely we've seen the proliferation of rats that President Flynn mentioned, and I think it's just one of those things that when it becomes a problem on your street, in the back alley, in, at the corners that you're traversing every day, it rises very quickly to number one concern, just because it's so unpleasant. And we know that rats carry diseases and carry all kinds of things, and so I think it's just something that, like all my colleagues have said, has to be front and center in our city efforts to get right. And while it is an eternal battle, and we know that human beings have been waging war against the rats among us for millennia, it is still something that we can do better and worse, and we want to very much be doing on the better side here in the city of Boston, and figuring out everything from the kind of response, like how do we respond when the problem's spiraling and getting worse in a particular location, and then also thinking proactively about what are the things that we could do to just make the food sources for these creatures less accessible to them in the city. So very glad to be having this hearing. I'm grateful to the sponsors. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. John Ulrich, who, as I said, is the Assistant Commissioner for Environmental Services at ISD. And then, like I said, we're also joined by Public Works folks, and so we'll go to some questions and probably have them come up as well. And then, just so folks know our run of show, we also have a community panel. We're going to hear directly from some of the community members and leaders who have been dealing with this issue in their neighborhoods after the administration. And then, as I mentioned before, we're also taking public testimony. So if you're watching this at home, you can email ron.cobb@boston.gov to get added to the list, or if you're here, you can just sign up on the sheet in the corner. So John, over to you.
It's good to be with you, councilors, Madam Chair. So environmental services, our main function is rodent control in the city of Boston. Currently, we have 13 inspectors who are licensed pest control applicators, and we are in the process of interviewing for the fourth spot. The main function of how we address rodent control in the city is we enforce the sanitary code, the state sanitary code. We also have a site cleanliness ordinance in the city, which regulates dumpsters. And so we also regulate capital projects around rodent control with Boston Water and Sewer when they are doing sewer repair. 311 is a great tool. I heard you mention 311, and sometimes folks don't totally understand. The best way to use 311 when you're putting in a complaint is through the app. The phone works, but app gets a response. If you put in a complaint for rodent activity, you should receive a response from an inspector 24 to 48 hours, and contact information should be there. Rodent activity is based on three things: food, water, and shelter. And in the city, that's a challenge because of density. And so what we do, we write violations based on the sanitary code to address those things that create supportive environments for rodent activity in the city. Proactively, we bait sewers. We do pest control on city, public lands, city parks, and we do sewer baiting across the city. New tools that we have, someone mentioned dry ice. Dry ice was a very good tool. Because of the regulation federally, it has become very difficult to use. So our answer to that was we purchased 2 machines that use carbon monoxide to treat burrows. And so we're using those machines in our parks to address rodent activity. As far as residential areas, one of our best tools is education. And so our educational material, we have printed in 6 languages. We have 4 bilingual inspectors. And we conduct walkthroughs throughout the city. In the last 9 months, we have done 2 walkthroughs per week. And I would say that we've probably been in every neighborhood probably twice. Some of the councilors have joined us, and we do it in coordination with our friends at Code Enforcement. Public Works has been a huge help to us. Also, Boston Water and Sewer. We have a team that goes out to inspect breaches in the sewer lines, and so we use a machine to detect breaches in the sewer line. So partnerships across city government is a huge help to our operation.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Are those your remarks?
Yes.
Great, excellent. Okay, I will go, I'm going to reserve my questions after colleagues go, so I'll go first to Councillor Flynn. And as I mentioned before, obviously questions for John on environmental services, and then if there is something Public Works related, we'll ask Dennis Roach and his team to join us. So President Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to John and the team for the professional work you're doing. So I know you have 13 inspectors that are doing this work. How many would you like to have, or how many can we boost it up because we got money in the budget on this?
So they haven't allocated what that looks like staffing-wise, but I think it will include at least one more inspector to that.
Okay, the 13 inspectors,
So currently, we're interviewing for a 14th, so that's our current budget without the additional money.
okay,
And then the additional money, it's not clear exactly how that works out, but it's at least one more inspector, possibly two.
in the 13 inspectors that we currently have, how many of them work during the weekday? How many work on the weekends, and how many work during the nights?
So we have no staffing during the weekends. It's a Monday through Friday operation. We have 4 inspectors that start at 4 a.m. We have an additional 3 inspectors that start at 6 a.m. and then the rest of the crew starts at 8. We do have 1 inspector that works Monday through Thursday, a 10-hour shift. So he's there till 5:45.
Okay, so my concern or my challenge is, since we don't have them on the weekends, so basically Friday afternoon, say 6 o'clock in the afternoon, until Monday morning, we're not doing much on this through the inspectors.
Not as a part of our regular program. There is something in the works for an on-call, which is new for our division, but that we would have inspectors that are on call that would start after after 4 o'clock, weekends and weekdays. So anytime there was an inspector on, there would be an on-call inspector to cover that shift, if something came up.
Okay. And again, I know the tremendous work and professionalism of your team. My concern is, I think we have to shift a focus and have a robust activity in dealing with this issue on the weekends. That's when we especially need them. Friday nights, people are at restaurants, Saturday mornings, breakfast places, and Sunday mornings and Saturday nights. I know it's going to cost money, but that's what we advocated for in the budget. But I think it's critical that we have an active engagement from city officials on the weekends dealing with this issue. Is Chris English operationally overseeing a lot of this, John?
He would be a good person too, yes.
Okay. I can reach out to Chris as well, because actually I get most of my calls are on the weekends from residents. I was at the Union Park Neighborhood Association event last night and had an opportunity to talk to all the residents, and they were asking me about pest control. What are we doing? You guys got more money in the budget, Flynn, but when are we going to start seeing results? That's what they were saying to me. So, I want to make sure that we get back to residents with a update on exactly what we're doing in all of these neighborhoods, how we're dealing with this problem, and what solutions we're going to see. They weren't asking me about major policy decisions or issues. They were asking me about pest control. Maybe I'm the pest control guy, I look like a pest control guy. But they have made it clear to me last night, and the same thing with my residents in South Boston. They're expecting us to be more engaged, to be more active on this issue. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody at all, but as we move forward, I think we need to have a more engaged outreach on pest control, and I'm willing to work with everybody as I have been to keep this conversation going, to keep this dialogue going. But it's going to take all of us to work together on this issue, including working with restaurants, illegal dumping. I see a lot of illegal dumping as well in Chinatown. People, for some reason, think they have the right to throw trash anywhere they feel like in Chinatown, including construction workers, contractors, I should say. One person dropped construction material in Chinatown right near Tai Tung Village. So that's like Tyler Street. And I couldn't see the license plate. So I have a bad foot, so I had to chase the guy. He's in a truck. I had to chase him all the way up Tyler Street, and then he went down to Beach Street, and I chased him down to Beach Street, and then he went towards the theater district. I chased him there, and I stopped there, but I couldn't run any further. But my point is, we need to be aggressive on dealing with illegal dumping as well. That's a critical issue facing the city. I'm going to stop there and give my colleagues an opportunity to weigh in.
Great, thank you so much, President Flynn. Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the state sanitary code, and we follow that. And then you mentioned city rules. Do we have additional city rules, or are they the same? If
So,
you could just clarify, that would be helpful.
The site cleanliness ordinance is a city ordinance which regulates dumpsters, so bulk refuse. And so containing trash and making sure it's stored properly. Trash is the #1 food source across the city for rodents.
So two more things. So do you think that that code is enough? Do you think we need to update the state sanitary code, or are we not update theirs, but have our own so it's stronger?
So as far as the site cleanliness ordinance, we are looking at it to see if we can tweak it, if there's additional things that we could add to it. I know that the former Assistant Commissioner, Leo Balger, had looked at it before I took over. And so we are looking at it to see if there's additional things that we could do.
Because I know when we met, was it like January or December, when I first got on the council, and many of the emails, but one we recently got from Luann showing pictures, and I learned from all of you that you only need to store your trash in a covered barrel, but when it gets brought to the street, it does not need to be in a barrel covered. So could you just go over that rule? And I think, is that tied to the times you can bring your trash to the street also, because they know that a lot of it is not in covered barrels, that it's open in like white kitchen trash bags?
So that would be a Public Works question.
Okay.
For us, we would write a violation if you weren't storing it properly. So if it was in your alleyway and you had holes in your barrel.
But that's storing it during the week, correct?
During the week,
But
yeah.
on trash day, like my trash comes on Friday, so I can put it out. Because like I mentioned when we met, like I have
Right.
several apartment buildings, and if you drive down the street on Thursday evening after 5, there's hundreds of just kitchen bags piled.
Right.
And they're gonna be there until the trash comes, and it may not be until noon until Saturday.
Right.
And they're not in violation because they were storing it during the week in the covered barrel or in a small dumpster. So
Correct.
I think that education also is helpful to know that it technically, for many of the residents, they're doing the right thing. So maybe we need to change what's expected. Thank you for coming up. So I have lots of rats on my street too, and I do know that a lot of people, when we get calls, they say that about, well, they're putting their trash out in bags, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure they can. So if you could clarify that, that'd be helpful, whoever wants to.
Yeah, I mean, that's our biggest issue with Public Works is residents are allowed to put it out in bags. So containerization of trash would solve a lot of problems curbside. But as the current ordinance sits today, they are allowed to put it out in bags.
Sorry.
No, you can ask.
No, I was just going to ask if that, and I mean, I guess the question would be, I know that the reason that is because there's a lot of neighborhoods in the city, and I represent a number of them, where there's nowhere for people to keep barrels, right? So trash is going straight from the kitchen trash can onto the street, right, for trash hours. But the ordinance doesn't it doesn't make any distinction between sort of places where you couldn't keep a barrel versus places where you could.
That's correct.
Right,
The
yeah.
clarification I was curious.
And there's no limit also, right?
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not like you can have up to 4, because some of
The
these,
only limits are, it's residential trash and not commercial waste.
which it all would be in apartment buildings, but it could be like.
Well,
like I said,
that gets back to the illegal dumping issue that sometimes you see. Sometimes illegal dumping is commercial waste that's sitting on top of residential
Right,
waste.
it's added to a pile.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thank you.
So maybe that is something we need to think about changing. But working
Yeah,
with
I
you
mean-
to figure out like how could we support.
And one of the things we've been looking at internally, at least recently, is not so much, I mean, they're changing the ordinance to make more of a containerization kind of law would be a big step in the right direction, but also education that not putting in containers can lead to a rat issue. So if you have the capacity to put into containers, if we can get some kind of more educational program out there, we're looking at that as our team right now about how to do some more education in all the neighborhoods.
Which would be great, because people don't believe me. And I didn't when I first met with you, but yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden.
Thank you. It's hard to believe, we've been doing some research into rodent control in the United States and places, and Boston used to be held up as a model for a great place. I think it was a spin-off of the Big Dig, that we had a really integrated rodent control program that was the envy of the world. And I was just wondering, did that sort of go away after the Big Dig was all done and dusted? Or are there any remnants of that program left over? And do we have an integrated pest control management plan still in existence from that time?
I would say that we do, and that is our program. I think that I wasn't here during the Big Dig, but I think that a lot of the things that we have in place were a result of that time. And so our goal is to reduce rodent activity. The 14 inspectors, 22 wards citywide, our enforcement is only one step. And so I think that we have to find ways to get residents to participate and pay attention to trash and the causes of rodent activity.
I think one of the things we're up against also in Brighton is we have a very high level of absentee landlords and a high level of big apartment buildings that have a management company that not always diligent in taking care of their sanitary situation. So, how do we flag? Do you have a way to flag problem properties isn't the right word, buildings where there's a chronic problem, like the dumpsters are chronically under overfilled or uncovered, or just the sanitary conditions are bad, and are the consequences of being a bad offender in that space?
So the violation moves forward if they don't correct the issue. So we write a violation based on the sanitary code. That violation, they have 4 opportunities to correct that through administrative hearings, and then it goes in front of a judge. And then the judge can determine whether that turns into a criminal complaint.
So,
And then as far as, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
As far as dumpsters go, our site cleanliness ordinance is a pretty hefty fine that is enforced. John Blackmore could talk a little more about the enforcement of that. It's $1,000 per day fine after an initial warning. And so that helps us regulate the dumpsters.
And do you find that the fines, is that enough of an incentive to make people shape up and do the right thing, keep their places clean and tidy?
Sometimes we find that they do, sometimes, you know, we find that it takes going in front of a judge to encourage folks. Some of the larger property owners, they're dealing with illegal dumping in dumpsters, and so a lot of their argument comes back to us and says, well, we maintain our dumpsters, but somebody is dumping in our dumpsters, and so, you know, we put that back on them, that they have to show proof. But again, that goes into a code enforcement issue. John Blackwell can talk to that.
I can actually expand on that too, because our program runs kind of side by side with them as the residential trash program, but we have 7 inspectors citywide that we do monitor dumpsters and how they're being set up and how they're being serviced, how often they're being serviced, what's in the particular dumpsters. We inspect them all the time, and if we find something out of the ordinary or wrong or overflowing or illegal dumping, we do refer it to code enforcement. Most of that done is by 311. Our inspectors will react to 311. But we do, like every one of our inspectors knows the problem dumpsters in an area. We're constantly checking them on a weekly basis, usually on the trash day or on or around their particular trash day, to see if we have any type of illegal activity or something wrong with going on the dumpster, and then we refer it to code enforcement to inspect for a violation.
Yeah. So if a dumpster doesn't have a lid on it, then that's an automatic violation. It has to be a covered dumpster.
That's a violation of the site cleanliness ordinance. It's also a violation of the sanitary code. And so code enforcement could issue the violation for the site cleanliness. The way that works is they issue a warning first, but then our inspectors could write the violation for trash not stored properly, and then that would go through the regular process. So then they would have, on a regular violation, from the time it's served by a constable, they have 7 days to correct the violation. After 7 days, it goes back out to re-inspection. If at that time they're still in violation, they're sent to an administrative hearing, and then on to housing court.
It's also hard to tell what level of violation changes the behavior of what we do, but what John and I see out there is a lot of our violations aren't changing behaviors of absentee landlords. Am I incorrect in saying that?
It's almost like the cost of doing business.
That's sadly the situation.
Sadly the
And
situation.
I was out on a walk with you fairly recently, and we saw some dumpsters like that, and it's just, go back today, the situation probably hasn't changed at all. Yeah. So let's see what else. In terms of just community engagement, I think I agree that public education is really important. And is there any plans in the works to work with Office of Urban Mechanics or anywhere we could really ramp up the public education so that everybody becomes sort of a rat warden in terms of trying to change behaviour and make, because it is a human created problem that we have that we need to work on.
The most immediate thing we're working on now, we have an intern in the audience now that's working on the Chinatown litter pilot for us, and I can turn it over to Teresa here. She can explain a little bit of what's that about, but we plan to expand upon, after studying Chinatown, expand some of the ideas and things citywide to other neighborhoods as well. So she can give a little bit of an overview of what we're doing there.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces and some new ones. So we are doing an anti-litter pilot, as Dennis spoke just briefly about. What that was born out of is that we've gotten some community members reaching out to us, trying to ask for a solution. So we onboarded a really great intern. He's here with us today. So we wanted a community-based solution. So I had him go out, and he's been having internal and external stakeholder interviews to try to get at what is the root cause of all of the litter in the community. From there, he's also looking into what has other cities done, both nationally and internationally. And then he's compiling all of his findings into kind of like a menu of options on what we can do about this. One option that we're leaning really heavy on is figuring out how do we containerize our waste? Like, if the problem is, let's say, commercial waste is just not regulated as much as we want it to be, maybe we can have like a central container, similar to New York City has like a clean curbside program, where it's like a large container out on the curb, and then like all the businesses can put all of their waste in there. So there's somewhere, so it's just not on the curb, because when it's on the curb, as you guys know, that's when the rats get in and they have a feast. So if you eliminate that, then you'll see less rats in your neighborhood. So that's something we're actively working on right now.
Thank you. How are we doing for time, Maya?
You're getting close, but it's about to go off. But
I'm about to go off. I'm about to go off.
okay, all right. Yes, I think we'll go to a second round. Councillor Louis Jen.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. I just had a question I wanted to follow up on the federal regulations that made it more difficult for us to procure and use dry ice. Do you think you could expand a bit more on that?
Sure. So,
Because, I mean, I think a lot of us were under the impression that there was like a monopoly issue happening, like it was a, you know, it was hard for us to actually obtain the dry ice because of a company that moved outside of the Commonwealth, or there was some competitiveness issue.
I believe we were the first, Leo Bulger was the first to use it in the country. And basically what our division did was we would go to Brookline Ice or an ice company and would pick up 50 pounds and then would go to the Commons and would fill up burrows, and we were pretty successful. The federal government came in and regulated it, and so currently the regulation is that we have to buy a label in Woburn. It's called rat ice, and then we have to drive to Rockland Dry Ice Corp to pick up the ice, which is about 60 miles. Dry ice is not a stable, it evaporates the minute you pick it up. But with those challenges, we know it's in fact effective, so we try to figure out a system that would work. Over the past year, we've tried to pick it up 5 different times, and Dry Ice Corp, which is the only place we can purchase it, has said they had no dry ice. And so it just became too challenging. To use dry ice, you have to constantly use it. You have to keep on going back and filling the burrows, seeing which ones reopen, and then going back out and refilling them. If there was a way that we had a supplier inside the city, that would definitely make it more available and to be part of our regular program. Our solution was these machines that work similar.
The carbon monoxide machines?
Carbon monoxide, a little more labor in, getting the machine in there, but work similar, reduce the risk, and are pretty effective.
What about, I mean, I'm just throwing this idea out there, what about the city's ability itself to explore its ability to create dry ice? I'm sorry, what about the city explored, and I'm just throwing this out there as a potential, right? Don't know about the feasibility of itself becoming a manufacturer of dry ice, being able to solve the problem in-house?
So I don't believe we can, because we have licenses issued by the state that a regular resident, I don't think there's any rule against them going to pick up dry ice and putting it in a borough. Because we have a license, we're not allowed to do it unless it's bought the way that I explained, that we bought a label in Woburn from our distributor and bought it from the specific producer in Rockland. Other than that, even if we produced it ourselves, it would be the same issue.
Do you know, I mean, I guess because I don't know a lot about this regulation, what is the theory, what is the thinking behind it? Do you have, what is it saying, what is it getting at?
So my understanding, I wasn't in this role at the time, it was actually before I joined the division, that because it was being used as pest control, to use it, normally it's used in other ways, but to use it as pest control, it needed a label. That is the federal law, that if you're going to use something to kill rodents, it has to have a label.
Okay. My next question, I I think there's maybe some work. I'm curious in us exploring, what we can do in this realm, but I take it that you feel sort of hemmed in by federal regulation, federal law, so I won't belabor that point, but maybe my colleagues and I can take a look at what is possible there. With regard to dumpsters, I believe under the site cleanliness ordinance, it requires that dumpsters are covered. There are a lot of instances that I see, especially in the neighborhoods of Mattapan and Dorchester, where our dumpsters aren't covered. And I wonder is it more, in terms of regulating the dumpsters, is it more from residents who have to call 301 to put you on notice, or is it ISD or Public Works themselves able to see when violations are occurring? How do you manage dumpster violation issues? Is it more coming from you internally, or more responsive, reactionary to what residents are saying or telling you is an issue?
So it's both, site cleanliness or...
Yeah, is there one more than other? Where do you operate from more? Is it more from hearing from residents, or is it more a part of your regular routine, seeing how dumpsters are being maintained?
So, site cleanliness ordinance is renewed yearly, and they get a yearly inspection of the dumpster, yearly. And then we respond to 311 complaints in regards to those dumpsters.
So that yearly inspection is something that is planned. You contact the property manager, the owner.
It's planned on the renewal date.
Yeah. And so I'm just, I'm dealing with a particular dumpster issue in Mattapan that has been violation after violation. They don't have a cover. And it has taken the onus on the residents each time to, make a complaint, and now I'm able to elevate it. And so I guess this is going back to Council President Flynn's question about the capacity to do more than a once-a-year check, especially on repeat offenders, or what we can do if it's a cost of doing business. Do we increase the cost of doing business? A lot of these dumpsters that are unsightly, especially in neighborhoods that have been traditionally ignored, would not fly in other neighborhoods. And so I'm wondering what it is that we can do, both from a resource personnel end, to be more proactive in neighborhoods that are often dealing with being, under-resourced and being ignored, that have absentee landlords, and how we can, penalize absentee landlords and property owners for failure to maintain dumpsters up to code. And that includes increasing fines. That could also be, being more proactive in terms of, placing liens, things of that nature, to make people, increase the cost of business so that they know that we care extensively about this issue.
So I think that code enforcement does do regular inspections, and they could speak to that. There was an email that I received, so I may not know which dumpster you're...
Yeah, the dumpster on Tennis Road.
On Tennis Road.
Yep.
And so...
3 dumpsters that are unsightly in front of people's homes and right behind. It would not fly in most neighborhoods.
I agree with you. I was the inspector in that area in Ward 18 and in 2019, and did extensive work. And we have an open court case and a court order on that property and for that company. And so a lot of dumpsters you may have like that you may not know, but they're in court. And so that was able to just be brought back up, and they'll be back in front of the judge. We don't even have to write another violation. We already had a court order for extra pickups, for additional dumpsters, for new lids, for replacing of the dumpsters. We were out there at 3 in the morning taking pictures before the trash got picked up. I agree with you that is a challenge property.
And then I guess, and I'm glad to hear that. Oh, was that my time?
That's fine.
Okay. Is there anything that we can actually, what bothers me about those dumpsters in particular is the placement. That they are in front of where people live and there is something that smacks in the face of, we don't care about people in this neighborhood, we don't care about the street, and we can place the dumpsters anywhere we want. Is there anything that we can do as a city about where we can place the dumpsters? Or is there a way that, a place that is more dignity affirming for people who live on that street and who have to travel in that neighborhood all the time? Because to me, seeing that dumpster there is symbolic of so much of how we treat certain neighborhoods in the city.
So I don't believe we dictate where on the property Public Works might have some more say in where the dumpster goes, but we could definitely look at that.
Yeah, and is there any creative thinking around that issue? Because I'd love to be a thought partner in thinking about how we don't have people staring at dumpsters that are unsightly, that smell, that attract rodents every single day when they wake up and when their kids are returning to and from school.
So I can further expand upon that. So we do work with property managers all the time about dumpster placement. Most of it is focused upon how the trash trucks can access the property without much involvement with parking or anything like that. But if there's any problem issues, like something you see like that, if you work with our office, we will be happy to go back out there, meet with the property management, and find a better place that's more affirming to the residents, as long as our trash trucks can access it.
Yes.
Access it. So we'd be happy to call any property management, meet with them, have them move it. It just has to be accessible to our trash trucks. But be happy to do so if your office contacted us.
Would absolutely love that.
And I'll make note of that particular one, because that has been a problem property over the years. I'm well aware of that property amongst. Yeah.
Thank you, yeah, because we were emailing a bunch last week. So whatever it is, happy to work in partnership, be out there myself, figure out what we can do with those.
We'll actually be proactive, and we'll get the property management name and number and contact them this week to see if we can meet them and find a better solution. So.
Awesome, thank you.
I have an officer checking it daily.
Thank you. And I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and that goes with any other property that you see out there. Call our office, and we'll meet with property managers. We'll see if we can find a better spot that's not invasive to homeowners or people residing in the area. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lujan. Yeah, a couple of questions from me. One is just, so obviously we talked about the dry ice issue, and my recollection from when Councillor Flaherty was asking this a couple of years ago had to do with, it's basically that this company got like a patent on it for rodent control, and so when we're using it that way, we're bound by the patent law that says they need to get our money, and that's basically my understanding of what's going on. So there is some kind of monopoly type situation.
I believe it was Bell Labs got the patent. It's chemically no different than regular dry ice, and the EPA is the regulation. And so I don't know if there is some waiver, but for us, it's because we hold licenses that it would affect our ability to do pest control in the city.
Right. And then there's quite a lot of press lately about these zapping machines that Somerville's been investing in, the smart boxes. Any thought? I got a bunch of queries about whether we're using those in Boston, whether we think they're effective, et cetera.
So we had a meeting with Modern Pest a while back to look at those. The main issue, and we're still looking at it, is that it's a service they provide. It's not something that we can purchase at this point. Modern Pest holds the patent to that box. There's also a source system that Somerville may be using. So we continue to look for stuff like that, and we'll have another conversation with Modern about it. But like I said, it's not a product that we can buy. It's a service they provide.
Got it. And then on the public works side, I wonder. It seems to me like any opportunities for us to get the trash into real containers wherever we can is important. I know that said, I do represent several parts of the city where there truly is nowhere for people to keep said containers. And so I know a few years ago we had tried those sort of hula hoop, pull up kind of trash barrels, temporary trash barrels. The idea being that people could store them, flat and then raise them for trash day and put them out. I actually had a sample one. I was part of the pilot. But my sense was that we didn't deem it successful. They sort of disappeared. Mine was stolen. I think a number of people's were stolen. They were sort of like a heavy-duty laundry basket for people who know the kind of dorm laundry basket that goes flat. But I'm curious about that, because it does seem to me that in some of the neighborhoods I represent, we would continue to need to think about collapsible solutions if we were gonna try to.
Yeah, in those particular units, I don't know how successful they were for a rat issue. They were more for a litter that was, flying down the street, paper and products like that. There was containerization that way. I don't really think that they actually
Thick enough.
solved, a rat issue that could chew right through the sides of them or jump over the lids, or, if they're not zippered, you can get in them pretty easily. So that was more of a litter issue versus a rat issue. But like you said, either the bins were stolen, misplaced. In the areas we piloted them, they stopped using them.
Yeah, and so have we thought at all again about that aspect of the problem, because it's one thing to ask somebody who could put a container out to do that, but in terms of thinking about the places where storage space is at an extreme premium.
Yeah, there's a few things that we have going on. We've thought about looking at smaller trash bins that would help maybe not all the residents, but a certain sector of residents that had room for smaller ones, curbside ones. We've also gone in today, we actually kicked off food compost in the city, which, if it works properly over time, will take food waste out of the actual trash and put it into that containerized bin. Which could be helpful over time. So there's little problems that we've thought about there, but I think it's more educational resources, and I think it's thinking of different solutions that come out of the Chinatown pilot, that come out of some additional thinking about how we can educate people that containerization is the way to go if that's a solution for you. We also have to think along the lines of what big buildings are doing in terms of dumpsters and food waste and things like that. So if we long term, I think our curbside program doesn't include big buildings for food waste, but if food waste was able to get out of the dumpster over time with a different type of big building program, I think that would be a helpful as well in a solution for the rat issue.
Yeah, no, I would love to see us moving towards requiring our big buildings to have a real, food waste management system, and I also think that's something that, frankly, we should be putting it into the Article 80 process with new buildings we're permitting right now.
Correct.
There's no reason someone should build a new building with a trash room that doesn't anticipate compost and organic sort of segregation, but even our other building, we're asking our big buildings to retrofit on a number of fronts, and this seems like one of the ones that we should be pushing. Can you talk to me a little bit about I think we continue to feel in a bunch of the downtown neighborhoods that we still do see the effects of the shift in the trash contract from a 7 a.m. to a 6 a.m. start, and I think ironically, we feel like we're experiencing the negative effects without them really being necessary, because with the exception of, I think maybe it's the North End where the trucks start, they're never hitting Beacon Hill, for instance, in the 6 a.m. hour. And frankly, I think you guys have made an effort to have them hit later. I think they mostly show up around 11. But it still seems as though that theory that you could miss it if you didn't put it out in time for the 6 a.m. definitely shifted some behavior to putting trash out on the street in bags, because that's what almost everybody in Beacon Hill does. People just don't have bins overnight, right? And it is like a rat feeding frenzy. So I'm kind of, and I've wondered not only if we could push the contract back to 7 in the next iteration, but also whether, if there were ways to have, trackers that gave people a more confident sense of this is when your trash truck is going to show up. You're giving them that kind of couple of hour window. I just feel like we could shift behavior that way. So can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think that, when we made the move, it was to avoid certain things like traffic and running up these trucks up to the dump sites, which is outside the city of Boston during peak hours, and getting them back on the street so we can get the streets cleaner. I'm not sure how much we've seen of that yet. I think we have to continue to study that and watch it evolve, and we have to take advantage of, whether it's new technology or different ways of running routes. We have to continue to analyze that now and to make it a more efficient process, because I do agree that if it's changed anything, people are putting it more out overnight with the earlier hour. So we just have to continue to kind of evaluate why that hour made a difference, or if it did make a difference, or what we can do to change it to make it more efficient.
Yeah, I just feel like we don't really have to study that. I feel like it did happen.
Yeah.
Just anecdotally, I would say that there's enough observation, and I would say it did happen even if it doesn't make sense, right? Even if in fact people didn't need to make that shift. I think that they did, and so the question of like, it almost feels like the question before us is not why did that happen, but it did, what are we gonna do about it, right? Like, how do we give people the confidence that they can shift back to putting their trash out the same day? That feels really important for the pest control issue, at least in my neighborhoods. Because right now I feel like if you sent somebody down looking at the sanitary code, they're not actually gonna have a lot of citations they can give when you walk down a street where it's just covered in plastic bags that are all not opened by the rats. Everyone's doing what they're allowed to do, you know? And can we talk about liens? I mean, we've got both our code enforcement things and then the violations of the state sanitary code that you're enforcing are separate from the PWD code enforcement
They
violations.
are, and they're not punitive, so we don't, there is no dollar amount.
So they go to court, but
They
there's
go-
no cost associated with
There's no
them.
cost. The judge may be able to give a fine, but they're remedial.
And, I mean, I guess the concern would be, it seems like, I mean, it's sort of like both good news and bad news that we've already thrown the book at the folks who Councilor Louis-Jean is concerned about, right? Because it's like, on the one hand, our system is working, we've noticed these dumpsters are problems, we've done all the things. On the other hand, it hasn't caused the problem to go away, right? Which is, of course, what our constituents actually want to see. So when you talk to us as legislators, like, I mean, what could we be doing to give more teeth to these things? I mean, I think John and I have talked before about, I mean, I know there was a period in which it felt like we were converting code enforcement tickets into actual liens on properties more than we currently are. Is that correct?
Yeah, we haven't done any liens since I've taken over the department. I think the last time they did a session of liens was 2016 or 17. And I think it came back because there was issues with the information between the owners, between the handhelds, between assessing and water and sewer, giving us the same ownership. So they were sending out liens, but these people have already sold those buildings, so the liens were going to the wrong people. So I think that was the last, I believe I think it was 2016 was the last time they actually did a lien.
Right, but that seems like an information systems issue
Yeah.
that assessing could fix, and that shouldn't be preventing us kind of from getting folks' attention on this issue.
We've been trying to get it fixed, it's,
Yeah, okay, all right, I'm happy to also go on the warpath about that. I'm sure I have colleagues who will join me. Okay, I think those are, I have more questions. I mean, I think it's just that everyone wants to see actual progress, and I think that when your inspectors come and do those walkthroughs, and the people who are there are also the people who control the space, then it's amazing, right? Then like the education can really, like people can understand, oh, that's what's happening, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z. And I think we get really good feedback when homeowners have the opportunity to meet with those inspectors. But I think this gap that exists between the person who's able to take action and the person who is experiencing the really severe negative effects of just like tons of rodent activity around them, that's where I think we experience like most of the frustration. And so how do we close that gap and get the people who actually need to take the action to understand they have to do it urgently, I think is the task before us. Okay, I'm gonna let councilors have a quick second round of questions, just bearing in mind that we do have a community panel that's been very patiently waiting and I wanna get to them. Councilor Flynn?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again to the panel. So I want to be quick. Do we have, so is there an overall strategy? Is there one person that's the rat czar for the city of Boston?
I am probably it.
Okay. So the reason I ask that is we have a lot of city departments and city agencies. We have water and sewer as part of it. We have public works. We have code enforcement. We have inspectional services. Are we able to have a task force, a citywide task force on rodent control, on pest control, that like your team would, and communicate with each other daily maybe, or every other day, on what areas do we need to focus on? How can we coordinate our efforts? What do we need to do to educate residents? Are those types of duties, are they being conducted in like a organized format or system?
I would say that there's regular communication and coordination with, I work with Johnny quite a bit in Public Works, Eric Prentice, we work quite a bit with. There is a relationship with Water and Sewer around their capital projects and what we require of them, but not necessarily how you're speaking of it.
Okay. I know code enforcement, I know we only have a handful of inspectors, and they're down significantly. Does anyone have any update on that?
So we are short-staffed. We have 4 coming online, 2 next week and 2 on the 15th. And then code enforcement is going to be 24-hour operation as of August 15th. So we will have people out in Chinatown and all over the downtown area overnight for the commercial trash. That's never really been dealt with because we didn't have staff on overnight on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's my big, well, thank you for the answer, and thank you for the important work you're doing. That's my focus, is this has to be a 24/7 coordinated, organized way of going about dealing with pest control, is having a rat czar and organizing all of these efforts. But Saturday and Sundays, Friday nights, those are critical times that we need city services. So that's my goal, and I'd like to focus on that as we continue working on this issue. And then my councilor colleague brought it up, Kenzie Block, and my constituents in the South End bring it up often in Chinatown, but they don't have a place to store their barrels in their yard. They don't have a yard per se. They can't store them in a hallway. There's no room. So they're storing their trash for the week in their apartment. So is there anything we can do, thinking outside the box, regardless of what neighborhood it is, that we can help deal with that situation? And one option could be, is there an opportunity once a week, maybe, to have a truck come by neighborhoods at nighttime, where people could just throw their trash in the truck? That might help. Also, we have a lot of people that work second shifts or third shifts at hospitals, medical facilities. Sometimes the nurses, they might not be home to take their trash out. I think we need to think outside the box and figure out other ways to deal with this, and that might also include looking at what other cities or towns are doing across the country. Anyone want to comment on that?
I think a part of that will be looked at in the Chinatown Litter Project, but after that, it becomes a matter of resources, just dedicating some resources to additional trucks. That would be an expansion of the current trash contract. So we'll be taking a hard look at all those options as part of the Litter Project, and the end result of that will be a menu of options that we will be able to sit with the council, have almost a pricing menu of what it takes to get this accomplished or that accomplished.
I mean, my big ask during the budget season was to have a fully functioning pest control outreach, and that's the money that was added by working through my colleagues, that was approved by Mayor Wu. But we funded various pest control projects and departments so we could have a robust approach to this. So that's going to be critical going forward, because we need to provide the safest, cleanest, healthiest. It's a public safety issue, it's an environmental related issue, it's a public health issue. And I guess my final question or comment is I represent the area in and around Andrews Square as well with Councilor Baker. Mass and Cass is only, as you know, is only a quarter of a mile away from there. Are we able to thoroughly clean that area out every day? I'm concerned about that area, public health-wise especially. I see so much trash. I see so much pest-related issues. I see people eating food and seeing what impact that eating that food has on the health of the food, knowing that there's rats running around. So I have a lot of concerns about that, but can we do more pest control in that area? Because it impacts South Boston, it impacts Roxbury, it impacts the south end. And what are we doing on pest control in Mass and Cass?
So we did do a bunch of mitigation until the private companies took over. So the main focus was the shelter on Southampton Street. Currently, we do sewer baiting and right abatements.
Okay. Is there any structured outreach program that we have in that area that's ongoing, that's consistent? You know, I think we need to declare it a public health emergency there, because when I see people eating food and seeing rats running around there, I think that's a public health emergency, and I think we have to declare it so we can have a better pest control, have more public works down there cleaning. And I saw them cleaning this weekend rather, and they were doing an excellent job. But what else can we do?
As far as rodent control?
Yeah, as far as rodent control.
We bait the sewers, the street, you know, a lot of the property down there is privately owned. And so if there is evidence of rodent activity, we can make them get pest control. I'm not sure if our educational material, although we work closely with the Health Commission, if the folks that frequently down on Mass and Cass, if our educational material would have the desired effect on the rodent activity, but I'm happy to do whatever we can.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the team here. My final comment is I think it is a public health emergency down there. We need all the tools we can to clean that area up so it's safe. It's not a public health emergency, but in my opinion, it is, and we need to focus on the health and safety of residents and people down there, especially and including our city workers who are out there cleaning every day in and around that area. We have to also follow up on their public health as well to make sure that they're healthy, because I'm somewhat concerned that they've spent a lot of time down there interacting with the homeless community, cleaning up, but I'm concerned about their health as well going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Murphy?
Thank you. So I don't have any further questions, but thank you for all of this information, and I do look forward to working with you to continue to battle the rodents in the city. I did just want to quickly mention on something Council President Flynn mentioned at Mass and Cass. I do know that Tanya Del Rio, who you've probably been working with, who I know took over for Dr. Burrell down there, they have a schedule set up, and you probably already know that. And I drove through this morning on my way to work, and there were over 25 tents and a lot of trash, and it was very unhealthy. But on Mondays, I think it is the day, because I know Sue Sullivan has a crew of workers also who help clean up, and then you have a schedule with Public Works, and it's challenging. I understand it's difficult, so we definitely have to make sure. I don't think this every few days is enough, because you could drive by 2 hours later and it looks good, but then 3 hours later it looks like it did in the morning. So it changes quickly there, and it is a public health concern across the board in so many levels, not just the trash. But just thank you for being here, and look forward to working with all of you to help the residents, including myself, in the city of Boston, to curb this. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you so much, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden? Just hang on. Just let Ron, there we go.
Give it a minute.
Perfect. Yes.
Good. Thank you. I'm reading this paper about the success of the Boston Rodent Control Program way back when, 30 years ago. And one thing they were talking about was GIS, geographic information systems, as a way to track where the most intense activity is, and then to really be proactive in targeting your resources in the most effective way. Are you using a GIS system at the moment, or do you have access to that?
So we're currently working on it. Our team is working on mapping 311 complaints. They sometimes are referred to as heat maps, but also mapping the work we've done to see where the concentration of, sometimes we're reactive, and so we're reacting to an uptick in certain neighborhoods. And so being able to map that at a bird's eye view, and to be able to see where our resources are going and where we can improve in that. So currently the system is in place, and we just started to slowly input data, and we're training our admin staff on how to input that data. So hopefully soon.
So are you working with the GIS personnel folks? Is it a department? There's a small...
No, this is just within ISD, our ISD team.
Yeah, because I know there's a GIS program that has got this incredible level of information right down to, you can integrate a lot of information about, like, who's got the bins and where your problem properties, and you're integrating all that information to understand the holistic view of what might be contributing to a big problem in a certain area. You're able to integrate all that.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's I think that was the key in this previous iteration, was they did have a pretty robust global geographic information integration system that they could aggregate all the information and then make some good proactive decisions rather than being reactive to try and head things off before things got out of hand. Yeah.
I'm happy to talk further about it.
Yeah, we should connect you to the folks at the GIS people and see, because I think there's a lot of resources there that will leave it on the table to try and attack this problem. Let's see. I think that was really the only, my question is really about the effectiveness of our penalties and code enforcement, whether it's actually making any difference. These guys they just write it off as a cost of doing business, which is very frustrating. And then in terms of public engagement, I was just reading then, one of the other big issues with this, when it was so successful 30 years ago, was they worked with city agencies, community groups, contracted management and pest control firms. A blend of municipal and privatized functions worked well to find success, but only with technical assistance, open sharing of information and consistent communication among teams, and a building of trust. I think you guys can't do it all. We as city councillors and our communities are desperate to get a solution here, so we'd really love to try and work with you to try and identify ways that we can support and educate our community, have them be more aggressive in reporting violations. Like if you see a dumpster, you send it into 311 and get this, trying to really put a lot more pressure on the bad actors who need to improve, and then trying to change our own human behaviour in terms of our trash disposal and taking responsibility for things. So we're here to help in any way we can, so hope we can work together and see if we can crack this. I don't want to be coming back here for the next year and having the same conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you so much, Councillor Braden. Councillor Lujan?
Thank you, Councilor Bach. I don't really have an additional question, just want to say thank you. Want to make sure we work collectively with you all on the Tennis Road issue. And ready to, I think someone alluded to going to war. I'm ready to, on this issue particularly, but on these issues. I just want to reiterate the incredible importance of the work that you do, and thank you for that. And how important it is, especially in our Black and brown communities, where these issues and how the city does and does not respond can create this cycle of not feeling like anything we say to the city gets listened to. Like our calls, when we call 311, there's data that shows that Black and brown communities are disproportionately, there's more lag time in responding to issues in our community. So I think if we can help to get this right, when it comes to what our streets look like, when it comes to beautification, when it comes to controlling the pest issue, placement of dumpsters, that all of these sort of help to attack the disinvestment in communities and the structural racism and barriers that a lot of our neighborhoods have seen. So I think if we get this right, it can be, and things that people can physically see every day when they wake up in the morning, it can go a long way in sort of building faith and trust in government. And it's those small things that we sort of oftentimes ignore or don't give enough credence to. But I think it is probably the most visible way of folks believing that we care about them and their neighborhoods. And talking about Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, Hyde Park areas that are often, bear the brunt of, perhaps illegal dumping or of these unsightly dumpsters. So I commend you, and I think that when we're thinking about resource allocation, we're thinking about the incredible work that Councillor Flynn has done and others have done in advocating for resource, that we think about the work of racial equity and about equity being that corrective action for neighborhoods where we've ignored for too long. So I thank you for your work and look forward to partnering with all of you.
Thanks, Coach.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Lujan. And then could I just ask you mentioned looking for sort of smaller bins, which I think in my neighborhood, like you said, there's a certain percentage of people who would use them, right? There's no hope for those giant rolling blue things, but if it was something that was more like the size of a kitchen trash can, that feels like something plausible. But I guess, what are actually the regs on, like if someone got a container of a kitchen trash like size right now and put it out on the curb with their trash, like would it be used? Like what are the sort of regulations on that front?
No, we take everything that's curbside, so no matter how it's containerized or uncontainerized, we would take it. Most of our trucks on the street.
Would you leave the, like if this was a bin that somebody wanted to use again and again?
Yeah, they would leave it behind, like just as normal, as long as it's a containerized bin, we would dump it and go. The only way that becomes an issue is down the road and it doesn't really affect Boston too much, is if you have mechanical arm trucks. And you see that a lot in suburban neighborhoods where people aren't actually physically taking the stuff off the curb.
Right.
The truck arm is coming out, and that's when you need the bigger bins or the right size bins that the truck can pick and lift.
Right.
But we don't deal with that too much.
We seem
now.
extremely far from doing that.
We seem very far away from doing that.
I mean,
So
the whole
that's
reason
what-
we're talking about this problem is because of the inability
Correct.
to standardize. So it just
Correct.
seems like we're super far from that.
We are. No, I don't see that happening in the city of Boston, so.
Okay.
So that's why we have looked at other options. We're continuing to look at other options. And I know it's not a one-size-fits-all model for the city of Boston. Nothing in the city is, so.
And is there any effort to have the inspectors from your division, like, synced up with the trash in the sense of like, okay, like I think, we see a lot of rodent issues when the trash is there. And I know we had a letter that came into the committee from Councillor Braden's district of someone saying, I report that there are all these trash, rat problems. There's this bevy of rats in a trash pile. And then the next day, because they were in your 24 to 48 hour window, I get a response back that says, no rodent activity detected. And they're kind of like, well, that's because the rodents were all there when the food was there, and now the food is gone, and so.
So your question is coordination between trash pickup or trash?
So
when
my
the trash is on the
question would
street?
be, if for instance, there's a property that is consistently, putting trash out in a way that's creating a big kind of rat feeding frenzy, is there any opportunity to actually get the inspectors there when the trash is still out on the street so that the problem can be observed firsthand. Do you see what I'm saying?
I would say that on a case-by-case basis, they could call me directly or call the inspector, but as a program citywide, we would have to look at it.
Right, so I just think it would be interesting to think about, because we know what neighborhoods of the city we've got trash out licitly from 5 PM until the next morning each day of the week, right? So it'd be interesting to think about, is there a way to do, you know, some coordination between like the kind of zones that the inspectors are prioritizing on a given day such that they might be more likely to catch the activity, right? Because like dumpsters are going to be overflowing on trash day, right? And so if there's a way for it to be like, oh, okay, we know that we've got a bunch of overflowing dumpsters in this neighborhood, and we also know this is this neighborhood's trash day, and so we try to kind of proactively send the inspectors there on the trash day before it all gets picked up.
Yeah, we could look at that. With 13, 14 inspectors citywide, the coordination can be challenging, especially like on a Monday, where we have, 70 cases from over the weekend. So responding to complaints and the coordination with trash pickup could be challenging off the top of my head, but I'm happy to look at it and maybe talk about it more.
Yeah, I think it's to Councillor Flynn's point about, and I think also the point Councillor Braden was making of sort of the coordination element of this. Like, I'd so much rather, it's like on the one hand, you guys have a sort of speed of service that you're trying to hit, right? You're trying to like get back to everybody's complaints within the 24 or the 48-hour window. And I think it's always behooves us to think about when are those types of performances actually, like, are they incentivizing quite the right thing? Because for instance, like, if people are complaining early in the morning on Monday, and you could actually go and catch that rat problem sort of like active, right? And actually see the problem and cite someone, I'd so much rather that you're doing that than that your inspectors are going to a bunch of cases that came in on Saturday just to respond to a bunch of constituents, sorry, I didn't see any rats, right? Because for me, if 70 constituents get told 48 hours later, sorry, I didn't see any rats, and then the ones that we could have gone to in those like couple of hours after their complaint, we could have actually caught the thing red hot. It sort of just, it feels like it would be interesting to think about what are the opportunities to coordinate timing-wise there.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all so much for being here with us, and I think this is a subject of very active interest to the council, so I think we're gonna, be keeping at it with all the sponsors and thinking about, I know I'm definitely planning on following up with Treasury and assessing on this liens question, and looking forward to, early signs of what the composting pilot can do on the waste front. But I think, under the President's leadership, it's definitely something we're going to continue. So we may well have future working sessions on this. So to be continued. But I do want to go now to the community panel, which, as I mentioned, has been waiting quite patiently for the first hour and a half. So if you guys want to free up these seats, I'll have them come and join us. So thank you so much for being here. And the folks I've got coming up next are Bob Williams from the Union Park Neighborhood Association. I've got Mary Chin, the Executive Director of the Asian American Civic Association, who should be coming in on the screen up here. And then Luann O'Connor, the President from the City Point Neighborhood Association. And if you guys can come and fill in, sit where they were sitting, that would be fantastic. Oh, okay, sorry, I think Mary actually had to jump off, so we'll just be hearing from Robert and Luann. And then we'll go to anybody who's here for public testimony. And I also just want to note that a number of you sent in communications to the committee, and so we've been compiling that dossier of examples of the challenges that we're facing with rodents in the city, and we'll make sure that councilors get all the copies of that. Thank you. So, yeah, so Bob and Luann, welcome. And thank you for being patient, and sorry that we lost Mary. And I would love, I'll leave it up to you guys what order you want to speak in, but why don't you take the floor?
Sure, I guess since I'm at the center here, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just to kind of change the thinking of this meeting, I just thought I'd throw out something in terms of a definition of insanity. And to me, the definition of insanity is repeating what we've done traditionally in the past and expecting different results. And I think there's a lot of that happening within the city in terms of going after pest control. And so what I'd like to do is spend the next 5 or 7 minutes just giving you an idea of what the effects have been in the rat infestation in the Union Park area, what we've been seeing in terms of what neighboring cities have been doing around pest management, what we've seen within the city of Boston, what we've been doing with the Union Park Neighborhood Association, and then just finish out by making some suggestions on different approaches that we might be able to take. So to give you an idea of what's happening in the South End and very specifically in the Union Park Neighborhood Association, the UPNA, our neighborhood association, has created a rat committee to try to solve the infestation problem. It, over COVID, was extremely bad, and it continues to be bad. And I get a sense that there may be some people that are thinking, hey, COVID is over, the restaurants are reopening, the rats are going to kind of disappear where they used to be, and the problem will be partly solved, and we can go back to business as usual. And I just want to make sure that it's clear that that is not what is actually happening, that the rat problem is still a serious problem. If I look at what the issues are that we see in our neighborhood, monetarily, on top of just quality of life, car damage wise, just anecdotally, 4 people who have had car damage, totaling about $13,000 worth of work that had to be done on the cars. And what I see, commonality there is that cars that have soy-based wiring harnesses end up being lunch for the rats and creating problems there. So we had 4 cars. One particular car had $9,000 worth of damage, another $2,000. And a couple of other cars with $800 damage. And if you've heard from your constituents that say, hey, I took my car for a drive and the check engine light is on, and I took it to the car dealership, and well, they found that several wiring harnesses have been chewed up, so that is just anecdotally on one block of our neighborhood, and I can't imagine what that effect is citywide in terms of both cost and inconvenience. Property damage wise, the rat burrows are pervasive out there. One example that we have is one yard behind one of our properties had 10 to 12 burrows that they couldn't get rid of. They actually blacktopped over the whole backyard, and the blacktop collapsed, and those dozen burrows came back again. And they're doing some additional work on it. But one of the key things that I think had caused this huge rat problem was a combination of a restaurant local in the neighborhood who was washing the kitchen grease off of their floors out into the alleyway, which would come down, go into the street drains, and would pool around the street drains itself, which created a permanent water source for the rats, on top of having the grease, which attracts them from a food perspective. So a big problem with that particular property. We had another owner that shared a picture of 30 dead rats in their backyard. We also, one of the things that we've noticed is that as we were looking at, what can we do differently in our neighborhood, we looked at, people using exterminators. Many were using exterminators. Some of them had, bait traps and snap traps that weren't being serviced. So they were just sitting there and actually acting as kind of places where the rats can hide. And you'd take the rat trap and move it aside, and there'd be a burrow under it. So it was doing just the opposite of what it was intended for. We had another neighbor who decided that they were going to completely try to eliminate the rats from getting into their backyard. They put in granite stones under the fences that they had. They completely hardscaped all of the exposed dirt in their area, took out all of their gardens, $25,000 worth of work. And in the end, this particular owner decided I've had enough, and they've decided to sell and move out of the city. And that's one of two people in the neighborhood who have made that statement. And I'm worried about that in terms of citywide. From a food source perspective, I'll kind of quote, John Ulrich, one of John Ulrich's senior guys that I worked with in ISD, really great guy, really dedicated. And I'll always remember it. He said there are three things that rats need. They need food, they need water, and they need shelter. And until we get rid of all these bags of garbage that are out for potentially 8 hours overnight, twice a week, we're going to be continuing to feed the rats. And that's another example of why are we looking at baiting sewers and putting out bait traps and snap traps. And at the same time, right next to those traps are huge bags of food source for the rats. So, I'll talk about one of the things that we're doing. Well, I guess I'll say one of the things that we're doing in our neighborhood is we are purchasing trash barrels for any of the residents who can accommodate them in the neighborhood and trying to get as much trash off of the ground as possible. And I've been working with Councilor Flynn to see if there's a way also that we could make that either a pilot program or a citywide program to be able to distribute trash bins throughout the neighborhood or throughout the city. I guess a couple of other last statements before I get into some of the specifics. When I take out my dog at night before turning in for the night, I typically see 2 to 3 rats. It's just a normal thing, and it did not happen before COVID. It would be an occasional rat. So that's a great example of the state of where things are at this point. I have also another friend who lives on the edge of Peters Park, and his home office looks out on the park, and he basically says every night he looks out in the park and there are rats scurrying around the park, throughout. So I'm wondering there whether there's any kind of public park programs to try to mitigate the existence of the rats in the park. As Chris McNally from ISD had said, until we get the garbage off the ground, we're not going to get rid of the rats. And what ISD does is fantastic in terms of their baiting. Chris McNally came out one night and did a snap trap program in the neighborhood and killed 13 rats that night. And he was actually, saying based on what I've seen evidence-wise in the neighborhood, I expected a lot more than 13, but I'll come back another time and we'll get another 20 or so. So an example of where we're at in our area. So on this second page, I talk about, well, what are we doing in the neighborhood and what are the cities doing around us? As we were researching some non-toxic alternatives to poison bait stations, Ultrapest or Contrapest is a product that was identified, and I had found out that the city of Newton was using it. Got in touch with the committee that was actually working that, and connected Councilor Flynn with that person. We had a great meeting with them. Really expert person on their pest control program. And the thing that I took away from that is it was a project-based approach. It wasn't, hey, let's take each of our individual departments and have them do what they traditionally do. It's get a project manager, put it in place, find out what do research on what the actual major problems are, document those, find out what the, do research on the methods that can be used, whether that be CO2 machines, whether that be contrapest as a, or traditional methods, where should they be used, et cetera, and implement that in a programmatic basis. And the City of Newton had a very comprehensive presentation that showed all of the capabilities of what they did. City of Cambridge, very interesting. A couple of points that I'd make there is in June, they just implemented a trash barrel implementation for the entire city. So they offer 3 different size trash barrels to every resident within the city, and are programmatically distributing those throughout the city. And I think that's a great program. The other thing that I noticed in their program is that they have a private property rodent control program. So one of the difficulties that we had in the neighborhood in terms of trying to expand the amount of extermination companies that are working with our properties is getting the property owners actually to participate. There's a lot of apathy out there. But we were able to get about 20 properties to sign up for a program. But when working with ISD, they were saying, hey, we can't work on private property, there are issues with that. But now that I see that the City of Cambridge is doing that, they're actually using their ISD equivalent to qualify properties of 4 units or less, and using a third party to actually do the extermination work. And that would be a much more effective way of getting better presence of treatment within neighborhoods by being able to work on private property and not just public properties. And then finally, the City of Somerville has a rodent control program out there, and the thing I'll mention there is that they're using an electronic device to basically electrocute the rodents. But the more interesting thing there is that they have a networking capability that notifies the city when a rodent has been done away with, so that they actually have statistics on the rodents that they're removing from the environment, so that they can manage that better than just putting out bait stations and not knowing what it's actually doing. So kind of in finality in this, I'll just mention 4 areas where I would say, from our committee, we saw as priorities in terms of being able to deal with those 3 areas that ISD talks about. How do we get rid of the food source? How do we get rid of the water source? How do we get rid of the shelter? I guess I'll start with the first point at the bottom of the page is I would strongly recommend doing a program managed approach, not take the traditional individual department approach. Have a coordinator or an out-of-the-box kind of thinker that goes around to the departments, does research in the industry, works with Councilor Flynn and yourselves on looking at the different cities and what they're doing, and put a comprehensive plan together to go after the problem. You had mentioned that the City of Boston was seen as best of breed back during the Big Dig. It'd be interesting to know, what was that approach? Was it a programmatic approach? Was there a project manager managing that? Was it truly interdepartmental across PWD and ISD and other departments within the city, and look at it from a programmatic basis? The trash bin deployment, I think that is the one thing, in the ISD individual was saying, it's just crazy. We're doing all of these other things and we just have all of this food out there. My thought is, if there's one thing that you could do, is if you can create a program similar to what the City of Cambridge has done to get as many bags off of the streets as possible. I think that would make a huge difference in terms of the rat population. Trash bin alternatives, and I heard PWD kind of mentioning that, hey, if, I think it was a mention of pick and dump or whatever it was, but I'm thinking it refers to similar systems that are used in European cities, and it's starting to be used now in the United States, where they have underground units about 8-foot cube that are either underground or surface mount, and use that for those areas in the city where there's not enough room for the actual trash bins themselves, so that you could place those in certain areas where there isn't enough room that people can take their garbage and put it in those bins, and then you have the specialized truck that comes and picks up those units and gets rid of that trash that way, and it removes those trash bags from sitting on the street where those properties don't have room for the barrels. And I would just, again, make a comment about being out-of-the-box thinking, and even for these underground or surface systems, it's a significant investment in time and planning to do that, because it involves construction, it involves new trucks, but taking the approach of, well, that's just too much, that's not something we'll ever do, I think is the wrong approach to it. I mean, if the city of Amsterdam is doing it pervasively, if the city of Paris is doing it pervasively, there's a couple of cities down in Florida that are using a similar type system, and there are American companies that make these systems, that it's worth spending the time and doing the research on it. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Well, that's quite a lot, Bob, and thank you. It's really thoughtful, and just a lot of good suggestions and insight here, and also some horrible stories. So, all right, we'll go to questions in a minute, but I want to go first to Luann and then to colleagues. So,
okay. Thank you for holding this meeting on this very important subject. So I sent in a few photos regarding of what Trash Day looks like on East 8th Street. And I was a little confused looking at the City of Boston website, because on one site it says that trash must be contained in a barrel, and yet on another website it says that it's really an option, that there are some special trash bags that are able to be used, but the rodents tend to chew through those. They chew through the hard top trash barrels as well. And the concern is, I love the Article 80. That is absolutely, should be brought up to BPDA. Any new construction should have a trash management system. So that was a great thought, Councilor Block. We are looking at a lot of development throughout the City of Boston in all neighborhoods, not one or two. And with that being said, that brings up the rat control. All they're doing is putting out black boxes, the bait boxes, that have the green bait inside of them, and they're basically ineffective. Councilor Flynn has asked 776 Summer Street, which is the Edison project, to go above and beyond their normal baiting. Has that happened? I don't know with the follow-up, but he did call for it. So what does that mean, to go above and beyond that baiting? What type of baiting are we talking about other than those black boxes? So it seems as though we have several different types of rat problems. We have commercial rat problem, we have residential rat problem, we have large building rat problem, we have dumpster rat problem. And each of those, I think, is going to require its own solution. So insofar as on my street, we have triple deckers, your traditional triple deckers with the back porches. That's where most people store their trash, unless of course they are turning their porches into living space, which then they don't have a place to store their trash. And what I was told is that it's difficult for them to bring trash barrels through their house down 3 flights of stairs. So in listening to what people are saying here, I don't know if you all remember, before the big blue recycling bins, we had the little Yeah, the smaller ones. So that might be an option, and if we could kind of redesign those, so to make them rat-proof, if you will, or as much as we can, that might be a solution where people can keep their trash there and just carry down that box. Now, will that work for the millennials? Absolutely. The only time I see that being an issue would be families. It would work for seniors. So it's just really the families that, would maybe have to figure something else out. I'd like to see, I like the idea, Councilor Flynn, of a task force, a rat task force, because I'm a little confused between the roles of ISD, code enforcement, DPW. So insofar as who's in charge of what, and when we make that call, who actually comes out to A, look at the rat burrows that are in our neighborhood, and B, do code enforcement for trash out on the street. I know that the fines are very little, they're like $25. And I mean, that's not a big thing. It's a parking day in Boston. So I think if we're going to do fines like that, we need to actually increase them and make it difficult for people to pay them, because unfortunately you have to hit people in their pockets sometimes in order to get them to conform to the law. So I think what I wanted to talk about too is, so the L Street bathhouse in my neighborhood, that is activating a lot of rodent control. I actually hit a rat on M Street. I ran it over, so that while I was looking for a parking spot for 2 hours. So I didn't feel bad for him. But with that being said, they're burrowing into our homes. So they're going inside, not only just through the burrows outside. Now, we did call, I don't think it was ISD, I don't know, Catherine Flaherty. Do we know her? Okay. So she came out to our neighborhood. I live on a terrace. There's 5 houses behind us, an illegal parking lot where we think most of this rat activity is stemming from, that they're coming up and burrowing. We have a senior citizen that has rat holes in her yard. And what is she going to do? So as neighbors, we tried the dry ice. That didn't work. We're putting in bricks, trying to fill it up. But what are the residents going to do? Because the abatement programs are very expensive. And I don't think that the seniors in our area are able to afford that, and or the families. So I also would like to see private property be taken in to consideration as well. And if anybody, we'll be going back through 311 to have somebody else come up and take a look, because the photo that you have, we have many more. I don't know what happened last weekend, but it was a frenzy. It was like it was a family reunion in my neighbor's backyard. There were like 6 of them. And it's not just at nighttime. They're also out in the day. So I'm not sure what's going on. Councilor Braden, you're absolutely correct insofar as the Big Dig. I am old enough to remember that. When it first started, there was absolutely concern about rodent control, and it was fixed. So it was livable. So that's something to look into, I think, as well. And then just overall health concerns with our kids out in the backyard. Our kids just, playing out in front of the house, our animals. And that's the other thing. We're using a lot of snap traps, because the sticky boards, they're kind of jumping over them, or they're shaking them off. They're very resilient. So the snap traps really are the only thing that's working for us. However, we're putting the peanut butter in, and we're catching more than just rats, unfortunately. There's a squirrel that was a casualty of war. There's a bird that was a casualty of war. So what are we going to do? Because we're all God's creatures, but not rats. They just have to go. So that's really all I have. I like the idea of we do need to think outside the box, because playing catch up and being reactive all the time versus proactive isn't working. And you're right, we don't want to have this conversation again next year, God willing. So that's all I have. But the construction is a major portion of it, because you're digging things up, and you're going into their burrows. The other thing that people aren't, that I haven't heard people think about yet either, is the composting. So the little green barrels, it's a great program to compost. However, in my neighborhood, 2 rats ate through the green bucket and got into the composting. So what do we do with that? Lack of green space too, when we're hard topping things. We need green space. And porta potties, it's a disgusting subject, I know. But with all the construction that's going on in our city, there are porta potties out there that aren't being locked, that aren't being emptied daily, and that also contributes to the rat infestation, as well as dog feces, which is everywhere. I don't know why people pick up their dog feces and decide to leave them on the sidewalk, in the gutter, in people's planters, but that's a delicatessen for the rats. So that's all I have. I hope that task force can, come to fruition and bring some experts in and maybe get a plan together to get this under control. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Luann. All right, I'm going to go to colleagues, starting with Councillor Flynn.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Bob and to Luann, the Union Park Neighborhood Association, the City Point Neighborhood Association for being here, for your testimony, for your work on these issues. Maybe a general question to both of you. How often are you engaged on this issue with city officials in terms of getting requests into the 311 system and maybe following up with, when you put something in the 311 system, give us an idea of what you hear the follow-up is and what you see on the streets from that 311 request.
Yeah, so I'll throw in my comments, Councillor. So we've been working with the city for about 1.5 years now. We've done, yourself included, a few walkthroughs during that. We've talked about a lot of these issues, and I think ISD was saying that the Union Park area probably had some of the highest density of 311 calls in the city itself. So from a follow-up perspective, it is very difficult, and I didn't bring this up, but we had specific issues with dumpsters, with a local restaurant, and there were actions being taken in both cases, and there was really no way to follow up with the individuals on what was happening, what was the status, what were the resolutions. I was able to get anecdotal information about, hey, Via Victoria had said that, hey, our dumpster overflow is because of people residents throwing garbage in our dumpsters, and actually was not the case at all. There was no way to get to those dumpsters except from a garbage chute, from above those dumpsters that our residents don't get to. So there was no real follow-up to say, hey, no, this is wrong. They did, I guess, find that one of the stores was using the dumpsters, and now there's an additional dumpster being used. So the capacity issue was resolved, but there were other issues as well in terms of no covers on the dumpsters, and there was no way to really follow up on that. So follow-up was an issue, and the same thing with action that was being taken on one of the restaurants that I've talked to John about following up on that, and hopefully we'll find out what the resolution is there. But there's no easy way for residents to know, hey, I put in a 311, it got closed out, I don't know what happened with it. So that is an issue, that if we had a better structure on follow-up and resolution and the ability to ask a question would be very, very helpful for the residents.
John, you made a comment that I wrote down because I found it to be a little concerning regarding 311. And what you said is that if you enter a complaint into the app, that you'll get a call from the inspector and follow up versus if you dial 911. So the reason why I'm concerned about that is that not everybody is tech savvy. Our seniors are not tech savvy. There are people that are low income that don't have access to that as well. So I just think that whether you are putting it into an app or a phone call, that it needs to be weighed equally so that everybody can have the same fairness for their call. So, Councilor Flynn, you and I have worked together with the Edison plant insofar as when you asked them to go above and beyond what they were doing. We don't know, they don't report back to us, so I'm not sure where that is. The L Street bathhouse, same thing, we don't know where that is. Insofar as our individual neighborhoods, we in fact call 911. We have had, like I said, Catherine come out. There was a gentleman that came out into one of our neighborhoods the other day, again, walking around looking for rat activity in boroughs, and they're finding it. And some of what the inspectors are doing, Council Flynn, is that they're making some of these residents put their house into an abatement program. And these are generally absentee landlords where this problem, is large. And that's what the inspectors are doing with that. But we need help on the individual residential areas of how are those boroughs going so far into our yards. It's quite a tunneling system, really. So.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Luann. I don't have any follow-up questions. The only final comment I will have, Councilor Bach, is I know this is a subject that we hope we don't have to deal with next year or discuss next year, but as district councilors, this subject is not going away, even if we do an excellent job on it. But we must do an excellent job on it. We must do better on this. But it's staying on top of this. It's working together, working with residents, working with city officials, working with us as city councilors, working with the mayor's office. But the problem will never be solved, unfortunately. But what it takes is a cooperation, a proactive approach in working together to improve the quality of life for residents, improving public health as well. So I want to thank my colleagues on the City Council for their tremendous work on this issue. Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn, and thank you for your leadership on this. Councilor Murphy?
Thank you for being here, and thank you for representing your respective neighborhoods. It's great to see you, and I know if we spoke to other presidents of different neighborhood associations across the city, they would have similar reports, but I do applaud that you are probably encouraging also, right, your neighbors to call 311 and report, because if it's rat control or speeding streets, whatever the issue is, we do always tell people that please call 311, please call 911 if needed, please make the city aware, because those hotspots, right? And if Councilor Braden, that tracking system you're talking about, and if it comes not, showing where are the rats, sometimes it's not just where the calls are coming from, and I know Councilor Louis-Jean was mentioning that there are neighborhoods also where people may not be calling, but they're there, and I know that the departments know. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And just to try to touch on your 311, and please correct me, John, if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure when he referenced that, what he was meaning is if you download the app and report it yourself, your information is part of it, so they know to return the call to you, so you would be able to track it that way. If I dial 311, the 311 person is going to enter it for me. I can or cannot leave information. You can do it anonymously or not. It's not that the complaint isn't filed, correct? The complaint is still filed with 311, and the department still knows that it happened. It's just that you're not directly doing it yourself. So if you want to track it easier, then they're saying. So we do know, and that every department knows, and not everyone has access to a smartphone and are able to report it through the app. You can always dial 311 also. But if you are able to use the app, it's just a better way to track it for yourself. So But thank you both for being here, and look forward to working with both your neighborhoods and the neighborhoods across the city on this issue. Thank you.
Just a comment on the 311 that you had mentioned, that it's becoming increasingly harder to get people to report because they don't necessarily see a reaction, so what is the follow-up when I report
What's the point? Yeah.
every hour when I see a rat? Is
Yeah.
there something that's done as a result of that? And over time, the rats are becoming normal, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not as shocking, and everyone says, oh yeah, they're in my neighborhood too, it doesn't make it any better, but it's kind of, we become numb to it.
Yeah. It would be good if the city could communicate, maybe even put out a report saying, hey, this is what we've been seeing statistically from 311. I know you don't want to necessarily publicize bad things,
No, but
it's
we
a
talk
way to
about- yeah.
educate the people.
We talk about that a lot on the council, that every department, we need to share the data, if it's the school department, public safety, even if it's not good data. We as residents have a right to know that, and we can't work together if we don't have the facts, so I appreciate that.
It's an effective way to plead for, hey, keep the 311s coming so we get even more effective data.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Braden?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and being here to raise up the concerns in your neighbourhood. This is across the city. Every neighbourhood has its own version of these stories, and I really do hope that as a result that we can really work together and build that integrated response structure that it seems to have worked way back 30 years ago. It was obviously a big federally funded capital project, the size of the Big Dig, massive project. There was probably money set aside to do that, but I think the learning and the lessons that were gained from that, we could try and apply again and build an integrated system. Not to say anything with the great work that the folks are doing right now, but we also have to engage with our neighbours and get more buy-in. I'm really concerned about what you mentioned, that there's a constituent apathy response, like, what's the point? I call 911, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Or I call 911, the case gets closed. They don't understand that it goes further and that there are people working behind the scenes, but we really have to engage our neighbours and really try and work together to come up with solutions to make our neighbourhoods a little less hospitable to our little four-legged friends, and see if we can change the picture going forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Louis-Jean?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to Bob and thank you to Luann for being here. I also want to thank you for providing alternatives, because that's something that is always really important for us to see what other cities and towns are doing. I especially like the idea of like in-ground alternatives. Can also help deal with the unsightliness issue that we see with dumpsters. Councilor Bach mentioned the Article 80 process, which I think is going to be a good opportunity for us to get, at least with the buildings that are coming onto the market, to get more creative thinking around that. So I just wanted to thank you and, double down again on what you said regarding, even if things are being responded to in the background, there needs to be more communication with constituents if that's what's happening, because that sense of defeatism is what we need to guard against in all of our communities that have the rat problem and communities that have been disinvested in. There needs to be sort of that continuous communication cycle between the city and community on what we're doing about the issue. So I ask that you not give up even when the problem feels really large and big, and that we are here to work with you and partner with you on this issue. So thank you so much for giving your time when you could be anywhere else on a Monday afternoon. But here talking about rats because it's an issue that is really important. Thank you.
It's not a sexy subject, but it's an important one.
Nope, not at all, but very important.
Yes, thank you so much. And we again thank Councillor Louis-Jean for being with us on her birthday for this. I'll just say for my part, a couple of things. One was just that, the funny thing about in-ground receptacles is that, we actually did them 100 years ago, right? There's still a handful of houses in the city that have those kind of
Chutes.
old too, right? And sort of the idea of routine refuse collection out of those. I mean, it is more than 100 years old, so it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. I've been thinking a lot about all the ways, maybe I'll write an article at some point about how like Boston in the 21st century has to be like Boston in the 19th century. Specifically, like we need carts to deliver things instead of giant trucks. We need like refuse tubes in the, that are allowing people to store their trash without these unsightly bins. It's sort of interesting to think about the ways in which the scale that the city was built at requires some of those like older solutions to, be rediscovered. So I really appreciate that suggestion. And just to clarify, Bob, the thing that I was referring to with the public work folks about not being feasible in Boston is that there are some suburban communities where you can only put your trash out in a certain type of barrel because they have these mechanized trucks that roll up and grab that type of barrel. And so it basically has a handle that needs to attach to a certain kind of handle. And so in that situation, you couldn't have kind of like bespoke smaller things or whatever. And I just think that we've got enough different typologies of housing in the city of Boston that the chances that we're going to move into a kind of one-size-fits-all solution like that seems very unlikely to me. I totally agree with you that if there are opportunities to look for like, whether it's underground or surface level kind of permanent installations that help and that replace, some of what we're seeing right now, that'd be awesome. Yeah, and I'm really interested in, I actually was gonna ask you just if you could say anything about what the bins that you guys at UPNA have been looking at getting and maybe coordinating with us on some kind of formal pilot, what type of bins have you been looking at?
We actually got a discounted price from Toter, directly from them, a price delivered to us. But some of the challenges that we have is, we're not a logistical company. We're just a neighborhood. So we'll try to get as many orders as possible. They'll deliver it to one location, probably in Union Park itself, and people will have to come and pick up the bins, and it's a one-time deal. And I'm sure there are going to be people that are going to say, oh, yeah, I could really use one of those too. And we did a tour around the neighborhood and talked with people anecdotally, and everyone's interested. But how do you get the most number of people to use those bins? And when somebody after the fact says, okay, I really want one too, we have no ability to follow up and do this over and over again. So if there was, I had asked someone from PWD, do you have a place that we could store these and just, on demand get them out to people? And they said, no, we don't have any ability to do that. So if there was some logistical way to help us out with that, that would be great. But ideally, what I would love to see is a program like the City of Cambridge has, where they announce this, they announce, these 3 different sizes, and based on the number of units per building, this is what we recommend, and then you order them, and then they get delivered, and you guys have trucks and delivery mechanisms and storage places that we just can't do as a neighborhood association.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would hope that when the PWD group was discussing sort of that idea of having a smaller bin option, that's part of the vision would be something like that. I know that we currently, for instance, those recycling bins, one of you referenced, the small ones, obviously there was a time when those were widely distributed in a similar way when we were first trying to kind of launch, I think it was the single source recycling program. But actually we still have a program in the city of Boston where if yours is broken, you can request a replacement, and we actually have a contract to like bring out a replacement bin to you. I think most people don't know about that. It's come up before in our conversation that people don't necessarily know that that's something they can do. And obviously those are not a solution to this because they're open. They don't have, in the current iteration, they don't have a cover or anything. But I do think, what you're raising is an obvious reason that we have city services and departments instead of just crowdsourcing these types of things. Yeah. But it would be great to, just see what you guys have found as like kind of an optimal size. I'm very interested because, I think the scale of thing that works in the South End is similar to a bunch of the neighborhoods I represent in terms of like what people
We've
need.
kind of decided on the 96 gallon, based on our buildings being 6 stories and average 4 units per building.
Got it.
And that kind of aligns, actually the City of Cambridge has a table that you can grab that shows the different size buildings and what they recommend.
Yeah. Cool. Great. And then Luann, just, this is a small thing, but if you had, I don't know if Teresa had heard about it previously, but if you had the contact for the person who had one of those green compost bins that got chewed through, it would be great to make sure that they get back in touch with the folks running the pilot, because I think it's going to be pretty critical to the implementation of our compost pilot that those bins turn out to be rat proof. So I think it would be really helpful for the city to know, was it locked? What's the, what part of it failed? Like kind of all those things, because I mean, the composting pilot is potentially a huge piece of the solution here, right? Because if we can get the organics out of the mix with everything else, that's huge. But then the organics have to be locked down, right? Or else we're just providing the buffet in a more concentrated 7-course meal kind of way. So just, it would be great if you could either give Teresa that contact info. She's the one raising her hand over there, or if you could talk to that person and ask them to reach out. Just because I think we'd want to nip any design issue there in the bud.
Right, and I think that's important too, because what I find a lot of people are doing is they're dumping their scraps into the city receptacles that are on the corner. So, you see the trash, in our neighborhood they're metal, but the black trash things, the receptacles that you're coming off from the beach and you have something, you want to throw it in there. People are actually using those to put their household trash in. And that in itself, DPW I think picks it up every day, but it's always those barrels are always overstacked. And that's also a state issue along the beach, because the same thing, DPW, I'm sorry, not DPW, DCR, yeah, will empty the barrels and just leave the bags right beside the barrel until somebody comes and picks it up. So that's also a state issue as well. Teresa, could I just have your last name, please? Sorry? Your last name? At boston.gov? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we call it a pilot because we're trying to figure out how to make it work the best, so it'd just be great. Yeah, okay. All right, well, I mean, those are all my questions. I would just say, I very much appreciate the tremendous work of our residents and also all my colleagues who are leading on this issue, and definitely, as I said, yeah, I'm also in the seeing 2 to 3 a day camp, and it never stops being horrible. And I think Councillor Flynn referenced the fact that, this problem will always be with us, but I think there are still significant degrees to it, right? And many of us who have lived in the city for a long time have seen it ebb and flow, and I think that, we have to feel confident that we are doing everything we possibly can, right? We have to feel like we have the best systems, we have the best coordination, we have the best responsiveness. And then, once we're there, it's sort of like, all right, so we're still, always gonna be fighting them a little bit, right? But I just think, I don't think we're there yet. I think that the point about we're putting out a buffet of food every day, every couple of days for them in our neighborhoods is well taken. And so I think whatever we can do collectively to coordinate on this issue and really kind of try to get good enough that they write a paper about us again, that would be great. Now, I want to go to public testimony if we have any. I don't think we've got anyone else signed up, but if you are here and you wanted to testify and you haven't signed up, you should sign up on the white sheet in the corner. And then, do we have virtual testimony? Okay, so I believe we have virtual testimony, so those folks are going to come through, and while we're just getting them queued up, I wanted to say thank you to you both, and feel free to stay there if you want, but also you can go back to sitting on the side. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just waiting one moment. We're getting everybody virtual testimony queued up. Is that Abigail? Is that Abigail? Annabelle. Okay, great. I think we've got Annabella? No? Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I don't know. Just give me 1 second. I'll have to get the name of who's on the screen. Okay, I think we've got Abigail Cohen. Is that right?
Hi, can you hear me?
1 second. Let me get your volume turned up a little bit. Can we turn her volume up at all? Abigail, can you try again?
Yep, can you hear me?
No, that just got quieter.
Oh no.
You're, just give us 1 second, sorry. Okay, that was loud. Say something again.
Hi, can you hear me now?
No, it's very quiet, like we can't hear.
I can try, is this louder? I can try being loud?
Yeah, well, we will conquer these technical difficulties.
Okay.
Okay, can you try to speak as close to the mic in your machine as you can?
Sure, is this better?
No,
No?
can't hear it. It's not muted, is it? No. The volume's maxed on our side. Can you try one more time?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we can't hear you.
You can, awesome. So now, am I shouting now or is it?
Sorry, I feel terrible. Do you want to try, Abigail, just maybe, well, obviously check on your machine, and then maybe just log out and log back in, and I'll just take Mandy, who's here in person, and then sometimes that works, I find, with the volume issues.
Or I can switch to my phone?
Oh, yeah, or you could call in, and we could take you.
Okay.
That would be great, too. Okay, all right, we're gonna wait for a second for Abigail to call in, but before that, why don't I go to Mandy Wilkins while we try to get her queued up. So, Mandy Wilkins, affiliated with Reclaim Rock City. You have the floor.
Cool. Can you hear me?
1 second. Oh, you know what? 1 sec.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm a long-term resident in Alston. Lived here for like a decade. And I'm with an organization called Reclaim Rock City. For those of you who aren't Alston residents, Alston used to be called Rock City because of its, big cultural music scene. I'm an artist myself, so that's why I moved to Alston. But nowadays it's called Rat City. Used to be, a pejorative thing. Now it's just kind of the way it's called. I think people have really taken it as the culture, which in my opinion is very unfortunate. I think it's a lot of that helplessness that I've heard talked about, especially with the folks from the neighborhood associations. I know, I've heard the 2 to 3 rats a day. I remember one time I tried to count the rats I saw on my trip to CVS just a block away. I think I got up to 13 rats that I saw. And that is, frankly, it's not something you can really call 311 about, because that's something that I see every day. My group has talked to probably 500, 600 residents of Alston, going both door to door, doing tabling, especially in Ringer Park, where the rat problem is especially bad. A big thing is containers being chewed through. People can request new containers. People can get new containers from their landlords, but they often find with a rat problem as bad as it is, the rats just chew right through it again. If you know anything about Norway rats, you know that if they don't chew, their teeth fall out. And so rats are just always chewing. They'll chew on whatever they can get. And trash bins are great things for a rat to chew on because it has food on the inside, right? But yeah, I wanted to get into some of the things that I've heard from a lot of residents in the neighborhood, and some of the things that my group is going to be trying to get worked on in the neighborhood. A lot of them have to do with Ringer Park. I've heard a lot of people here talk about trash cans that are open, especially in private residences, with absentee landlords, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, in Ringer Park especially, but this is also a problem in other parks in the Allston-Brighton area, there are open trash cans and not a lot of them. And so what you find, especially in Ringer Park, is that the park is just filthy. It's really filthy. It doesn't get cleaned enough, if at all. I know my organization has done 2 cleanups of the park, and we found that the park stays clean for maybe a week, and then we find it's filthy again. Garbage everywhere, especially glass is a huge problem. People can't walk their dogs in Ringer Park. And you know, if you go in Ringer Park at night, you can hear the rats ping-ponging around the trash cans because they're just wide open. This is also an issue in Smith Park, Mansfield Dog Park, just to name 2 others. Another thing that I've heard, especially from residents in the Ringer Park area, the streets surrounding it, I'm thinking about Ridgemont Street, Greylock Street, Alston Street, is folks saying that the rats have significantly increased, especially after the development of the New Balance building in Ringer Park, but also just generally developments in the area. There definitely is a connection between construction and the rat crisis, whether it's the digging up of burrows or buildings being completely abandoned, desolate, and perfect shelters for rats. And I know the pandemic, there is the question of restaurants, leaving out food and whatnot, but it also has caused a lot of local businesses to close, and we have a lot of empty buildings and a lot of rubble and a lot of construction going on in the Allston area, especially since Harvard owns a third of the land and is trying to construct on a third of the land. It's just a sanctuary for rats, which is why, of course, I'm seeing 13 rats on my walk to CVS. And so something really needs to happen. I think that when you look at 311 reports, it tells a story that is biased. It tells a story of the folks who are willing to call 311. I think that there's a number of reasons why residents don't call 311. I think especially in the Allston-Brighton area, it's this normalcy of the rat problem. People are just used to seeing so many rats. We're calling Allston-Brighton Rat City, which I don't agree with. That's why I'm trying to reclaim Rock City, right? But I think, calling 311 only, we're so focused on these short-term objectives, extermination, getting rid of the rats, but we really need to be tackling rats at their source. We need to be taking care of our green spaces, especially parks like Ringer Park. We need to be actually having closed garbage cans in our parks. One of the members of our neighborhood organization, Reclaim Rock City, has been in the neighborhood for 55 years and has repeatedly advocated for closed garbage cans to the city in Ringer Park, and things have been shut down. There's been a plan in place for Ringer Park for 20 years, and there's been no progress on it. And so, that's kind of why we took to forming this neighborhood organization, to get kind of the neighborhood's voice heard, really. So, yeah, I think that's all I'll say for now. But yeah, I really hope to see change because, yeah, I think that the residents of Allston-Brighton are so disillusioned by the lack of change that they've just taken it upon themselves to accept it. And I want to see that change because 13 rats is too much for me. And it's going to become a safety hazard. And it already is a public health hazard. So yeah, I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Thanks for joining us here. We're going to try going again to Abigail.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Awesome, perfect. I really wanted to just quickly add on, I know, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're good.
Okay. Bob Williams, I think, clearly did an amazing job explaining what's going on in the Union Park neighborhood. But I just wanted to say something, and so I was sort of just listening as the president of the neighborhood organization, but I apologize. I don't know who said that because the audio was a little bit tough, but one of the counselors said, I don't want to be back here next year having the same conversation. And I think it's really important to underscore that from what I've heard from everyone who's participated, this has been going on for so long, and we've all been making reports for over a year. We started our committee over a year ago. We had a walkthrough with the city in May last year, and then again. And we thank everyone so much for being present and listening to us. And I've heard a lot of great testimony, but my concern out of all of this is what are the action steps the city is willing to take? And I want to be able to go back to my community and not say, again, well, we had a great conversation. We're not sure what's happening next. And so, again, I just thank you for letting me jump in. Again, Bob did a remarkable job of sharing everything that we've researched and found, and he's been really pushing everything. But I just wanted to say that we need a result, and it can't just be little pockets of the community. I think it needs to be the city really putting not just money, but action, which of course action requires money, but more into this, because our neighbors are leaving. People are getting sick. And so I just wanted to add that in. Again, I apologize. I don't know which counselor said that, but that really resonated with me. So I just wanted to make it clear that it has already been a year, and it's been way longer than a year. So I thought it was important to point that out. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Abigail. And I think that was Councilor Braden, but I think we all share the sentiment. And yeah, I mean, it seems as though there's a number of real action steps to follow up on from this. One of them is definitely this question of how we can support the smaller scale bins for, resident organizations like yours that are already organizing and ones that might wish to do that. And I think, I think the thing about liens is a thing. I think that, what Councilor Flynn has called for in terms of some kind of a task force, more joined up, kind of getting everybody on the same page and meeting about this regularly. I think there's a lot of steps for us to be taking going forward. So this is it's the Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology, and this is about the most basic city services thing that we can work on. So I think we will definitely be working on it over the coming months, and trying to get to a better systems approach where everyone feels like there's been real progress. And we're grateful. I know that in that the workers and laborers who actually do all that joined up work were here with us today. And so I just want to thank Public Works and ISD again for joining us, and thank the community members for joining us and testifying. And also want to express my thanks to everybody who wrote in. As I mentioned, we got substantial written testimony. And if you didn't submit written testimony, but you are watching this after the fact and you wanted to add written testimony so that it can be circulated to all the counselors, you can email that again to ron.cobb@boston.gov or to ccc.csit@boston.gov. That's the committee address. Either way, we'll make sure to add it to the record. And I think this is going to remain an open matter for the council. It'll stay in committee in case we need to have follow-up working sessions and such. I'm just going to double check that we don't have any more public testimony. Okay, I think we may have one more, so we'll wait a moment. Okay, we will just be waiting one moment for another person to potentially join us for virtual testimony. Oh, okay, all right. It sounds like we we actually don't have another person, so with that, this hearing on the problems of pest.
If you want to eat healthy and feel your best, you gotta try Kachava.
Sorry, thank you. Docket 0467, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.